Good evening. How is everybody? Did you miss me? I missed you. If you're not aware, I was away last weekend. So there was no Sunday pub. But it's good to be back. And back in the Sunday pub. Who's here? Jeff's here. Hi, Jeff. Good to see ya. How has everybody's week been? Or I guess it's probably more like 2 weeks since the last pub, anyway. Joe's here. Hey, Joe. How's your writing going, Joe? Orsa's here. Jerome is, of course, here. Rogue is also here. All the regulars. Here's Ron. How are you doing? And here's Raph.
Hello, how are you doing?
Pretty good.
That sounds promising.
Joe is being pulled in too many directions. Cheers, Raph.
Cheers.
Yeah. That, I can imagine, leads to, which makes, I guess, writing difficult. Jeff has written about 5,000 words in the last 2 weeks. Excellent. Well done, Jeff. That is, I don't know anything about writing. I don't do much of it myself. 5,000 sounds like a lot to me. I know that probably like the hardcore prolific writers like Stephen King, they probably write that in a day. I don't know. But still, it sounds like an achievement.
I've written 5,000 words in one day before. Yeah. It's, the reality of being a humanities student when you ignore deadlines until you have like 20 hours left to hand in the paper and then you...
Yeah. I was a design student, but we did the same thing, just we weren't writing.
Yeah. I think it's a general student kind of thing.
Yeah. You produce a lot of... Actually, I think one of the best design projects I did in university was a last-minute thing. Because I had an amazing professor, Richard Carlyon, who was one of the most weird, kind of creative, unique people I've ever met in my life. I went to his house once, and he had, in the living room, he had a stack of televisions.
Wow.
And they were old black and white televisions, and they were always on, and the sound was always off, and they were all tuned to different channels.
Okay.
Just because he liked the visual impressions, but he didn't want to really get into television as television. He just thought it was really interesting seeing different pictures constantly. And he had a photocopier in his home, and every day he would photocopy one page.
Okay.
And it would be, sometimes it was photocopier art, like if you're photocopying and you move things while the scanner is going or whatever. Or sometimes there would be just a photocopy of an article he read, and he had boxes and boxes of these pages. They were like his visual diary. Really, really interesting guy. But the project I did, he wanted us to create cards, or they didn't have to be cards. I think it was just 12 images, which taken as a whole would be clearly identifiable as related to a current event and would express something about it, would give you some sort of feeling or information or something about the current event.
Okay.
And showing how old I am, I did the Exxon Valdez oil spill.
I remember that one.
Yeah. I did 6 cards, which were laminated, and they had an image on each side. And I took a huge bucket and filled it up with about 75% water, 25% waste oil. And I put the cards in under the oil, between the water and the oil, basically. They were floating in this bucket. And I just came in and put the bucket on the table. And it was kind of a risk because a lot of professors would be like, what the fuck are you doing? Yeah. But I knew that Carlyon would be up for it. And he looked at me and he was like, I'm guessing I have to put my hands in there, don't I? I was like, yep, you do. He was like, okay. And he was a very, very, in a way, a very stereotypical older gay man, right? He was immaculately dressed and, fancy, good quality clothes and everything. But he just rolled up his sleeves and took his sports jacket off, rolled up his sleeves. I gave him a towel and he put his hands in there and he had to squeegee like with his fingers the oil off of each of these cards to be able to see them.
Yeah.
And I got a good grade on that. He liked it.
I mean, I think it's a really good idea to do it that way because I think, when we talk about like or read about like oil spills and stuff like that, we're like we kind of know, and we even see the pictures sometimes, with like the birds and everything being coated in oil and shit. And it's gruesome, but it's like still like a very different experience if you actually have to, physically touch that stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, I also went to auto mechanic shops and got used oil from them. So it was pretty horrible. Like he actually the first thing he did is he looked at it and he was like, I have to put my hands in there, don't I? I was like, yeah. He said, I'll do yours last. Because after he
understandable.
After he did it, he was like, that was great, but I now need to go have a shower. And I was like, yeah, no, I kind of expected you probably would want to do that. So yeah. But that was also a last minute thing. I kind of had the idea, and I think 2 days before it was due, I did the images and laminated them. And then, it was an easy to execute idea in a way. But it was very last minute, but I'd had the idea and just been sitting on it, not doing anything for too long. So Keo 3232 says another Irishman. I think Rogue is also in Ireland or Irish, both. Have you been reading anything over the previous couple of weeks? That is a silly question. I don't think there are probably any weeks where Raph and I haven't been reading anything. But what have you been reading over the and have you read or watched Shogun? I can tell you now, in case you don't know, Keo, Raph is wearing a Blind Guardian t-shirt. That is not only a band. Raph is blind. So Raph has not been watching Shogun. Or actually, I meant to ask you this. This is something because you have mentioned films in the past. You listen to films, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, so it kind of depends, right? Like I used to be able to see more when I was younger. So there's obviously films I have seen. And like nowadays, like I don't watch or go to like the movies or anything as much as I used to, for all kinds of reasons.
Sure.
Mostly like social reasons. It just hasn't happened that much. But yeah, it's like basically, usually if I'm going to like the theater with like a friend, and they kind of help me, they kind of explain stuff to me if something important happens.
So you're like listening to the sound of the film, and then your friend is telling you like, okay, here's a scene with this going on. Or
well, I mean, it kind of depends, right? There's a lot of movies where you don't actually need to see that much because they're like very,
they're not super visual. Yeah.
Yes, and then there's stuff where we're like, I'm obviously missing something. Like I was in the theater for like the second part of Dune, and I'm like, obviously I'm missing Villeneuve's like vision of the film.
Yeah, I mean, Villeneuve is an extremely visual director.
Yeah,
like all of his films are pretty visual, and he goes in for the big scene, where, like, actually it was funny. The guy I saw it with afterwards, he was like, were all of the rooms in the first movie also this big? Because it's just like there are these scenes where it's just a huge empty room.
Yeah.
And there's like one tiny person standing over in the background kind of, and there's just like these huge spacious interior scenes. Yeah.
And I think that's like sort of like what I gather from Villeneuve in general as an artist, right? He has a very distinct idea of making, especially like science fiction stuff, choosing a very specific vision for that, like visuals for that, in a way that other some other directors do not, which is, I guess, why
Yeah,
he was a good fit to do that Blade Runner sequel, because Blade Runner
absolutely.
also has a very unique kind of visual.
Yeah, although I found it really interesting. Like the first Blade Runner, the original Blade Runner, is one of
Yeah,
my favorite films ever,
yeah,
and
rightly so.
I was I was skeptical,
Mhm.
as you can imagine. Like one of the
Yeah,
formative films of my youth that I've watched I don't know how many times, and somebody new decades later is making a sequel-ish movie, and I was like,
yeah.
I don't know. And he did a really good job, but it was interesting because it was a very different vision.
Mhm.
I mean, it was a different time as well. It's set
Yeah,
much later, a lot's happened, and it doesn't look, most of it doesn't look anything like the first Blade Runner. It has both of them have a very distinct
yeah.
visual style and visual expression and whatever, but it's a very, very different vision, but I ended up liking it a lot. In fact,
Yeah,
one
I
of the
think.
things I liked the least about it was that Harrison Ford was in it.
Well, yeah, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's kind of the thing, right? It's like you have, like, for something like Blade Runner, you need to have like a unique vision. It doesn't matter if it's the same as Ridley Scott had, but
Yeah,
it
it needs
has to
to
be
have a
unique.
strong
Yeah,
visual presence on the screen.
because like the
He's
language is
also
so cinematic in the first
yeah
one as well. It's like all these like very quiet scenes where you just have that whole like opening with that city
yeah
scape, like that kind of stuff. Like Blade Runner is a story that is told through images in a way,
yeah.
which kind of matches sort of the tone of the story, which is an incredibly slow story. I mean, I assume you've read it at some point.
I haven't actually.
You haven't? Oh,
No,
it's very different from the film, but it
right.
has like these also like very slow build up and description of scenes and stuff. So it makes sense to choose like a very this like sort of slow visual language to explain stuff in the movie.
Yeah, I've always heard that the story was very, very different from the film,
It
which is
is.
why, as a big Blade Runner fan, I never really felt obliged to read it. But I do want to read some Philip K. Dick, but I don't think that would be the story I would grab first. Anyway, I haven't read anything by him ever.
I think he's an incredibly fascinating author.
No,
He's got a very specific kind of sense of paranoia and dread in a lot of his stories,
yeah,
um, possibly tied to him taking a shit ton of drugs.
tied to him being paranoid and dreadful, or not dreadful, but dreading everything.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but, like that's kind of the thing. So a lot of his stories kind of deal with like a breakdown of like consensus reality and not being sure what is real and what isn't real
yeah.
and stuff like that. And
Taking
I
lots of hallucinogens will do that to you.
I do very much like maybe the wrong word. It's like I really appreciate what Philip K. Dick is doing. It kind of vibes with me in a lot of ways.
Right.
Um,
I think
but
I
yeah.
think I would like him.
Mm,
I think I would like him a lot,
yeah.
but I just haven't gotten to it yet. So, other greetings. Evie's here. Why are you not on the screen, Evie? She literally just got home, is what she's saying. How was my game retreat? For anyone who wasn't here 2 weeks ago, I went away to a Schloss. A Schloss is not a castle, which is what people usually say. It's more like a manor
Mansion.
house, a
Manor House,
mansion.
yeah.
Yeah, it's an old manor house. And I went to a beautiful old manor house in the middle of nowhere, northwest of Berlin, in Brandenburg.
Oh, I've been to
And
one of those manor houses there once.
there are
They're an
tons of them
incredibly
all over
yeah,
Brandenburg.
they're all beautiful,
Yeah.
and I was there for a terrible thing that I'm glad I didn't get into. It was an assessment kind of situation for a scholarship program
Oh,
by the Scholarship Institute of the German Industry, whatever it's called, der Deutschen Wirtschaft, Stiftung der Deutschen Wirtschaft. And it's
okay.
yeah, so you
This
can imagine
this
how well I fitted in there.
I can imagine that very well. Not at all, I would expect. This
Yeah.
is a what's called a gaming retreat. If you've ever been to a gaming convention, it's nothing like that. It's in this huge old beautiful manor house. It's role-playing games and board games, mostly role-playing games, but pretty much everybody brings 2 to 6 board games with them. So we had like a mountain of board games people could just grab and play whenever they wanted. and you stay for, in this case, it was 5 days or 5 nights.
Mm-hmm.
And you pay for basically room, all your food, and all the alcohol you want to drink, and snacks and stuff as well. And so you basically just go and enjoy yourself for 5 days. And I've been doing it. It used to be it was only once every 2 years, and then it was once every year, and now it's 3 to 4 times every year of different sizes. And this was
So
one of
it's
the
the Kraken, or
it's the Kraken, yeah,
it's the Kraken. Nice.
yeah,
It's basically like a cruise, but without the incredible damage to the environment.
or the boat, yeah,
Or the
exactly,
boat.
yeah.
The boat
And-
kind of comes with the damage to the environment, I guess.
or the stupid games you don't want to play, or the other annoying passengers, or any of that stuff. Yeah,
But
so
they started to do like themed cruises. Like there's like gaming cruises and heavy
Sure.
metal cruises and all this other stuff. So it's sort
Sure.
of like that, like you know, a
sort,
bunch
sort
of
of like that, but without the boat. Yeah,
Yeah.
And it was great, and I've been doing it for, I think this is my 9th or 10th year. And I've been to one almost every year for the last 9 or 10 years, and sometimes more than one. And it was really cool. It was really cool. I had a good time.
Is it still like very much tied to like Chaosium games? Because it started out like sort of as this offshoot of Tentacle, right? Which was very
Yeah,
much
Tentacles.
Chaosium genre.
Tentacles was the original thing, and it was organized by 2 guys, and they had a disagreement about how to run it, so they split. And one of them does Kraken, and one of them does is it Eternal Con? I think it's Eternal Con. And it's got a strong Chaosium relationship, but basically anybody can run any game they want. Doesn't have to be anything particular, but some of the people there, like my best friend works for Chaosium, he was there. Another guy, Neil, works for Chaosium, he was there. But it's not necessarily heavy Chaosium. Robin Laws was also there, if you know Robin Laws.
I know Robin Laws. I know he was there a lot, but you know, I mean, he works for Pelgrane, but you know, he's done like Trail of Cthulhu and all this other weird stuff.
Yeah, and he's done RuneQuest stuff, and you know,
yeah,
he works for anybody who wants to pay him.
But
really
he's
nice
also got like a long-standing kind of connection to Chaosium related products, so to speak.
Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun.
Imagine.
I got to try out a number of new board games. I got to play some role-playing games I've never played before or haven't played often anyway. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Although I got sick, like 2-3 days in, I started getting a heavy cold, and that made it somewhat less enjoyable because I had to keep play a game, go lay down for a couple of hours, and so on. Miggins is here. I don't know if Miggins has ever been here before. Hi, Matt.
Yeah.
Hi, Alicia.
I also feel like it's sort of like a kind of something that just happens if you hang out with a bunch of people in like a closed off environment. Usually you get sick at some point.
Someone always gets sick. Yeah, guaranteed. Erin asks, do you see the same bunch of people every year? Yeah, it's become a bit of a family. It's really interesting. Like, you know, you go and have a great time with these people once a year. So that's become the main reason I look forward to it whenever it happens, is I get to see some really good friends that I only see once or twice a year. Yeah, no, it's definitely a lot of the same people, but one of the things I also like about it is the guy who organizes it is very conscious about always leaving space, because it's limited. It's very limited space. Like this time it was 40 people, 38 actually. And the biggest one ever, I think, was almost 100 people. Wow. So it's pretty limited space. But the guy who runs it is very conscious. I think he says 15-20% of whatever the size is projected to be, he keeps open for people who've never been before. So there's always, you know, it's always people like me who are like, any Kraken, I'll go to it and I want to book. But other people like coming for the first time. There were I don't know, 5 or 6 people this time who'd never been before, which is cool.
Nice.
Yeah,
I've always wanted to go there, but it's always, you know, some things come up, or like timing didn't work out, or, you know, it's also expensive, at least for
it is expensive. It is expensive.
Yeah.
I mean, compared to a normal con, it's not cheap.
Yeah,
because you're sleeping there, you're eating 3 meals a day, and you're drinking Leaders of Booze.
Yeah, I mean, it's not expensive for what it offers. It's just like something,
Sure.
If you're as broke as me, it's not something I can do on a whim. It's more like I need to plan.
If you've only got $100 to spend for the weekend, you can't go to the Kraken.
That's the point.
Yeah, exactly. Did I hear someone mention working for anyone who will pay them? Hello, Brian. Yes. Bell Tube in the house. Good to see you.
Oh, I did finally finish, by the way. I did finally finish Terra Ignota, and to no one's surprise, I did actually like it all the way to the end. It's
how is the fourth book? That's the only one I haven't read yet.
Long. Like that's double the size of the other ones. Yes.
That's kind of why I stalled on it. I was like flying through the first three, and then I looked at that one. I was like, wow, that's chunky.
So that fourth one is all about the war, as you might expect.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be.
And
spoilers, there's a war.
It's got a bunch of really like relatively large plot twists for like something this late in the series. So there's that.
Yeah.
It's possibly a bit more action driven than some of the previous ones. It does still have a lot of like really cool philosophy references that like no one except like 5 people will get.
Yeah.
I'm one of those 5 people, so I'm very happy.
I would expect you to be, and I would expect myself to not be.
Like there's a scene in like relatively early on in the fourth book where obviously you've read the first 3 books, so you've come to the point where suddenly one this will be spoilers for Terra Ignota. You have to deal with this right now. When Thomas Hobbes is narrator, and they talk about something about free speech, and then narrator Thomas Hobbes kind of pops in and talks like, well, it might have been Charles Blount, my apprentice. And I know who Charles Blount is. And I even know the text, the essay that they're talking about, the pamphlet they're talking about in that situation. Okay. But I'm like, yeah, there's like 5 people who know this. And
not surprisingly, that is a reference I missed.
No, it's in the fourth book. You haven't even got.
Oh, right. Yeah. No, I'm sure there were a bunch of those in the first 3 as well, where I'm like, But also, I would say to anyone who's interested in reading some fucking amazing science fiction, it doesn't matter if you're a philosophy head like Raph. Like, I am totally not, and I loved those books. And Thornall asked, what are we talking about? We're talking about Terra Ignota, which is a 4-book series by Ada Palmer. It starts with To Like the Lightning, and the 4th book is called
Perhaps the Stars.
Perhaps the Stars. That's also one of the things I like. It doesn't make any difference, of course, to the book or the series itself, but her titles are awesome.
Good.
Yeah, exactly, Ron. She doesn't leave you behind if you don't get those references. Like I didn't have the feel. Sometimes I've had the feeling with some authors that they are way smarter than me and they want me to know it. And
speaking of that, me finishing Foucault's Pendulum.
Yeah, exactly. Like I've read Foucault's Pendulum as well, and I'm like, I know I didn't get half of the shit that this guy was throwing at me, and that was kind of pissed me off in a way, because it's like I understand that you're smart, sir, but I'm not enjoying it, And with Ada Palmer, she does it in a really smart way that if you're Raph, you get it. And it just adds a little extra background and richness to it, and maybe a laugh. And if you're me and you don't get it, there's amazing shit going on. Yeah. So it doesn't matter,
No, it's very
story is just really, really good. Yes. Yeah, exactly. It's just like the references are more, But yes, the titles are also references.
Yes.
They're mini quotes from different places.
Yes.
Yeah.
The will to battle, for example, is a Thomas Hobbes quote, which is why he kind of ends up in the book a lot.
Exactly. And To Like the Lightning is a Shakespeare quote, I think.
Exactly.
Yeah. I wonder what Palmer will write next. Something about Vikings. Okay, that's interesting.
She's writing a historical fiction about Vikings. She's also writing an academic book right now on the history of censorship. Because that's sort of like her specialty. Like she's a history professor in Chicago, and her topics are early modern heterodoxy, heresy, and censorship. Which is
for anybody, totally your shit. For anybody, I will probably not read that nonfiction book. But for anybody who likes Gene Wolfe, The
Oh, right. She's written
reason
an introduction to the new edition, right?
exactly the reason I got into her at all is I bought the new because I was going to reread Book of the New Sun by Gene Wolfe with Philip Chase, and I realized I didn't actually own a copy anymore. So I bought the new edition, and Ada Palmer is a huge fan of Gene Wolfe and wrote the introduction to the books. And I normally I'll read like 5 lines of an introduction because normally introductions bore the hell out of me. And I read 5 lines of her introduction, and I was like, oh, this is actually interesting. And I read the whole introduction, then I looked her up. I was like, I've never heard of this woman before.
Yeah.
Who is she? And I realized she wrote a well-regarded science fiction series. So
she recently wrote like an incredibly long essay on like the history of manga and anime for
which was very good.
It was really good. I'm like, I'm not into that stuff at all, but I read it and was like, wow, now I actually know stuff about it. I feel like I know stuff. So like, you can tell she's an academic, but she's also really good at teaching, which is not something that most academics are. So
that's true. That's true.
Tornall, yes, I have read 2 books by Poul Anderson. I've read both 3 Hearts and 3 Lions and The Broken Sword. Is it called The Broken Sword? I think it's called The Broken Sword.
I think it's called The Broken Sword. I read, it's been so long ago.
I really want to read The High Crusade because it's so funny. Like
someone mentioned recently Appendix N. If you know D&D, right? Dungeons and Dragons. Right now we're in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. And 1st edition wasn't called 1st edition. It was called Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. And that's where actually I got basic Dungeons and Dragons. And then I got advanced when I was like decades ago when I was a teenager. And the Dungeon Master's Guide for Advanced Dungeons and Dragons had a page in the back of it called Appendix N.
Oh, there's a bunch of appendices there. It's just like
there's lots of appendices, and they're all lettered, right? So there's Appendix A, B, C, D. Appendix N was just one page that was essentially 2 columns of book recommendations that said, these are things that inspired and influenced us as we created the game. And it's an amazing list of
books,
like up to kind of early 80s fantasy.
I think they've
mostly
updated
fantasy.
it with the 5th edition. We still have it.
It's updated. 5th edition is Appendix E now, but they've got a new one. Yeah. That's right. Jerome mentioned Appendix E because he's reading The Complete Enchanter by DeCamp and Pratt.
I've read that one too. That's a lot of fun, but also one that kind of works only if you've sort of read the stuff they're poking fun at. So you might want to know about Irish mythology, the Fairy Queen, and Orlando Furioso.
I don't know about any of those.
And Norse mythology.
Well, I know Celtic mythology and Norse mythology. I don't know anything about the other 2.
Have you read The Complete Enchanter by DeCamp?
I have not.
But
I just enjoyed the cover. Jerome posted the cover, and I was like, it's a Brothers Hildebrandt painting. Them and Michael Whelan basically illustrated my youth.
Very true. That Complete Enchanter is kind of funny. It's this guy who figures out how to sort of, through mathematics, to transport himself into like parallel universes that are sort of like based on different works of literature. And he then has like adventures, sort of semi-serious adventures in these worlds. So he kind of teleports himself into Edmund Spenser's The Fairy Queen, and then he teleports himself into like Norse mythology, and once into Irish mythology, and once into Orlando Furioso.
So he's not going into secondary worlds that the authors created necessarily, but more like existing ones from other places. He
deliberately goes into these worlds. I think at some point he goes like, I want to go into this very specific place. So he kind of targets that and uses like some weird like math equations to make sure that he ends up in Spencer's Fairy Queen or whatever.
Interesting.
That's a bit like sort of like slightly picaresque, slightly funny. He's always a bit horny. There's a clear like Fritz Leiber influence in there as well. Which makes sense because, Fritz Leiber is another one of the people mentioned in Appendix N.
Yeah, Fritz Leiber influenced pretty much everybody back
Yes.
then. Yeah.
As is Paul Anderson, and I think
Yeah.
they put 3 Hearts and 3
3
Lions.
Hearts and 3 Lions is on Appendix N. Yeah.
That-
I've been meaning for like a year or longer
Mm.
to do a video about Appendix N, because
Yeah,
I think a lot of modern readers, kids these days, who play D&D might not know a lot of those old books and probably haven't heard of Appendix N. And being an old role player like I am,
yeah.
Appendix N was, I mean, I read, I don't know, I've probably read about half of what's on Appendix N, because back in the day when I had those Dungeons and Dragons books, I found that page and was like, oh, great, there's a reading list for all this cool stuff. So I read a bunch of stuff. I read Fritz Leiber, I think, the first time, because there was stuff, the Lenkmar books were on Appendix N. So, yeah.
Yeah, like the interesting thing with like 3 Hearts and 3 Lions is by Paul Anderson, where you can see the influence. It's on Appendix N, and it's a fantasy story that's sort of around like the matter of France. So sort of like high romance, chivalry stuff happening, and it has all kinds of other things going on, and fairies, and Morgan Le Fay, and so forth. But it has a scene with a troll. They go through this cave, and there's a troll in this cave, and they figure out that you can actually burn the troll, because the troll is incredibly vulnerable against fire. And those of you who have ever played Dungeons and Dragons know that that's exactly the thing with D&D
exactly
trolls.
how trolls work in D&D. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of like the thing is, and it's
If you're new to D&D, by the way, and you
Yeah.
run into a troll, burn them.
burn them.
Anyway, go on.
Yeah, so it's just like interesting, because in this very specific case, you can just like see the one thing that Gygax and Arneson took from that one book. It's like, hey, we have trolls, they smell bad, and they burn really well.
Yeah. And they regenerate in D&D, at
Yes,
least.
they do.
Which is why you want to burn them.
Exactly.
I have been reading Sun Eater and finished Kingdoms of Death today. My goodness, was that a light and cheerful romp. I'm kidding, of course. That was sarcasm. It is not. Yeah, but good books. Just like, so far, that's the fourth book. Yeah, fourth book. And so far, each of them is a step up for me, anyway, at least as far as how much I enjoyed them. And also in a way how epic they are. Like, this is Kingdoms of Death was the epicest of them by far so far. And now I'm starting Ashes of Man this evening. Speaking of which, how about a reading sprint, everyone? How do you feel about a reading sprint?
God, that means I need to go back to that terrible French novel about a church that burnt down.
You don't have to. I wouldn't.
No, I have to read Hunchback of Notre Dame for like a presentation talk kind of thing. I'm going to give in Belgrade this upcoming week. So I have to finish that book. And it's bad. It's not good.
Yes, Jerome, epicer than Demon in White. Yes. It's pretty fucking epic. Hadrian, who's the main character of Sun Eater, I'm pretty sure at this point he has taken the place of Fitz in my mind as the most suffering. No, well, he is kind of dumb, but also just most suffering experienced in a main character. No, I'm not. No spoilers, but Hadrian suffers. Put it that way. But he's been suffering the whole time anyway. But he really suffers in Kingdoms of Death. Oh my god.
The question is, does he deserve it?
In this particular case, I would say not really. Yeah, Jimmy, spent most of my time with Sun Eater disagreeing with Hadrian. Yes, Hadrian is a Severian-like character in a way, where you want to slap him. He's a Fitz-like character where you want to slap him. Yeah, but just I've just been enjoying those books so much, and I'm going to start Ashes of Man right now. Let's have a sprint.
All right. For how long? Half an hour? 45
Half an hour. Yeah, exactly. On the hour. Let's say on the hour we'll come back.
Okay. All right.
And here's the banner, and mute yourself. Hello.
Hello.
How was everyone's reading?
I read approximately 4 pages, but it's 4 pages, so
Good to see you, Evie.
good to see you too.
How you doing?
I'm good.
You
Way
sure?
too much money today. Getting the dog his grooming appointment, getting the oil change.
You got your dog's oil changed?
No, the car's oil change. There you go.
Uh-huh.
Well, I
Okay.
mean, I guess kind of in a way it was.
Of course, dogs need oil changes.
And then I spent probably too much money at the craft store, but dadgummit, yarn was on sale. So
Yarn was on sale. On
See,
sale
that's the thing,
yarn
like
must be bought.
when I last bought like yarn for knitting, I actually bought it on eBay from like a shepherd directly. So I got like these like huge
Shepherd.
like yeah, Mac.
But did you have to like was it the raw material that he was selling and you had to
No, it was already spun into yarn. I wish I had a
Oh,
spinning
okay.
wheel and could spin my own yarn. That would be really cool, but spinning wheels are expensive. No, it was already spun, but it was not yet, turned into like nice balls, but it was still like the long when you have like, you buy it by the pound and you have like this large pile of yarn that you need to sort of like figure out how to turn into something manageable.
That's the way things are in Germany. It's all very low tech here.
Yeah, it all runs on diesel engines.
Yes.
They
And
brought
it's
us all the way to Stalingrad. They can't be wrong.
It's all shepherds sitting on hills with spinning wheels.
Actually, it's super funny. There is a shepherd coming like near where I live on like what I always call the Lonely Mountain. And there's like fields next to my house. And there's like a shepherd that kind of is like sort of like a traveling shepherd, and he kind of comes around every couple of months. When there's new grass there, and then he sets up like with the sheep and everything for like 2 days, and then he just moves on to like the next thing. Super fascinating.
Makes it sound like we live in Tajikistan or something.
I don't know.
How do you even have internet right now, Raph? Is what I'm asking.
Exactly.
There's this diesel generator, and it does do all the internet stuff as well.
A diesel internet. Nice.
It's diesel internet. It's diesel punk all the way.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, Germany is totally different outside of Berlin. Berlin's just like a city, like any other. Yeah. But everywhere else, it's all just diesel internet. Apparently.
To be fair, I don't have like fiberglass. I don't have fiber here. It's
I didn't have fiber. I mean, I'm in one of the oldest suburbs in Berlin, and I didn't have fiber until February.
Okay. Yeah. No. I have copper wires, and that's that's all we're gonna get up here. Because it's social housing, so there's like no deep incentive to actually give us anything more.
Sure. There's no return on investment.
That's that's how you would put that, right?
No easily calculable return on investment anyway.
Very true. Oh man, I learned more about architecture. How far into She Is the Darkness are you though, Evie?
I am a little over halfway now.
Okay.
I am on I just started chapter 52 of 108.
It's got like over 100 chapters. It's
108 chapters. It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like great.
Yeah, I love it. I think like She's the Darkness is not the easiest of the Black Company novels for me, because it's got like a lot of just like army stuff, and I'm not a fan of army stuff.
Oh, I thought you were gonna say because of the like the timey-wiminess of it, but I love that. Like
I like all of that stuff. I just really don't like the part about all the battle descriptions. I'm just not like the military part of military fantasy really annoys me.
I admit that I kind of glossed over when he was being like overly descriptive of the battles. I'm like, can we go back to just casually mentioning how there was utter destruction and you know.
Yeah.
Casual under destruction. It's been so long since I read The Black Company. I mean, like 20 years
They're
probably.
so
I
good.
remember, as always with me, the last thing to go in my memory of books is visuals of scenes. Like if there are good descriptions in the book of particular scenes, I will get a really strong image of them in my head, and those images stick. And I remember some images from The Black Company, and I remember a couple of the character names like Croker and Goblin and whatnot, but I just like almost no details, and certainly nothing about the style or quality of the writing or anything like that.
The
I like
writing,
battles. I'm one of
absolutely.
those people that actually really enjoys well-written battles, like Erickson.
Yeah.
Malazan, obligatory Malazan mention. Like Malazan battle scenes, I'm just like, yeah, bring it on. You know, Chain of Dogs, I'm there. You know. Yes, Ron, I am with you. When battles are good, they're great, and
I think
Erickson does them remarkably well.
Glenn Cook's style kind of is very underrated, and people kind of ignore it often because he's got like this incredibly good like deadpan humor, especially when he's writing like in Crocus voice. It's like when he starts the whole book, it's like one eye's handicap in no way impairs his hindsight, and I'm like, that's a clever sentence right there.
Oh my god, I don't know, maybe I've mentioned this before, but Glenn Cook for me is the singular best author when it comes to character voice and character interactions and dialogue. Like, he's so good. Like, I don't think it's a spoiler to say, but I'm reading, like, She is the Darkness and Bleak Seasons is Mergen.
Yeah.
From his perspective. I know it's Mergen as soon as I start reading his words.
Yeah.
Croker
it gets whiny, it's Mergen.
I love Mergen. I
like him too.
Mergen.
And I've said this before. My claim is, at its core, Black Company is a love story, and it's a good one. It may be more than one love story, but it's very much about love, and you know, the military stuff just happens.
I do remember now something about his style. I remember when I was reading Black Company at some point, I thought, you know, he writes kind of like Hemingway.
Yeah.
You know, like not many extra words. You know, it's all very short and sharp and direct.
Yeah.
And,
the very,
he can be incredibly poetic when he wants to.
Sure.
Because there are passages that just something like, oh my god, this is beautiful. But the line,
and I think that's kind of what makes like the poetic bits stand out, is because you're like, he's a bit like Cormac McCarthy in that regard as well, where he's like all these like incredibly dry sort of description and like very few words, very terse, and then suddenly he busts out like 2 sentences, and you're like, oh my god.
Yeah, exactly. He's very, I don't know, is economical maybe is that the right word? Like,
yeah.
He knows
he doesn't waste words
to put those makes those poetic, imagery type things. But the line that cracked me up, and I read it to some folks out of context because they haven't gotten this far yet, and they cracked up as well, so I felt justified in my laughing. But One Eye jumped down, started waving his arms around while he went to squeaking and squealing in one of those languages wizards use, so the rest of us will think there's something terribly strange and mystical about what they do, kind of like lawyers.
Yeah.
This is great.
There's a wonderful bit in She's the Darkness. I don't know if you're there yet. It's not a spoiler. It's just like one of those fantastic things when it's about magic, and he's the narrator is like, yeah, one of these days I'm gonna ask one of the wizards to explain like the rules of magic to me, but it's probably too complicated, so I'm just leaving it out for now.
Yes, I did read that. I was like, oh god, that's great.
It's so good because it's like Glenn Cook being annoyed with his fans wanting like hard magic systems and wanting explanations for stuff. It's like, no, it's magic. I don't understand it. You don't understand it. Deal with it.
And it shouldn't.
I did remember that.
It always takes something out of out of the world for me if
Mhm.
magic is clearly explained.
Yeah.
You know,
But that and there's a scene
it
in
should
She Is
be
the Dark.
arcane. I mean, the people doing it obviously have figured something out. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do repeatable things. But it doesn't need to be explained in detail to everyone in the world, including me, the reader.
Yeah, little brown man is a terminology that has not aged well, and it's also very repetitive. I agree. Which one thing that I loved in She Is the Darkness is when when Croker when Croker yells at Mergen for being too verbose in his writing. You have like that meta level of Glenn Cook having this series with different narrators, and one of the narrators yells at the other one for being too verbose in his writing. And I'm like, that's just like funny.
He's obvious. It's nice when you can tell in a book that the author is enjoying himself
Yeah, definitely.
and even sort of making fun of himself.
I will say, Mitch, that is like the only Black Company book that I've given less than 5 stars is oh my god, blanking on the one. Dadgummit. Dreams of Steel.
Dreams of Steel is the lady one.
No,
right?
no, Silver Spike.
Silver Spike is the one. Oh yeah, that's the sort of like what happens to the rest of the people in the north.
No, it's not that. Oh god, what's the one with the lady? Like she's the narrator.
That's Dreams of Steel.
Okay, Dreams of Steel then.
Yeah.
I loved everything about that, but I think I put in my review, I'm like, he had to have been watching Temple of Doom when he was writing Dreams of Steel, because I'm just like, this just feels like Temple of Doom. Like,
so it feels like a bad movie?
Temple of Doom is a great movie. Excuse me?
Yeah. Beg to differ. Brian says his current read does arcane magic perfect. Very little explanation, but enough to sort of get it. Exactly. You can't just say what I'm reading now, Brian, without saying what you actually are reading now.
Yeah, and what Ron said, William Gibson can do that. I agree. I think it's interesting to see though, and it kind of ties back with what, for example, what's his name, Stephen Erickson said about Glenn Cook is like it's Vietnam fiction on peyote. I think it's important to, which is a good way of describing it.
Which is a very good way of describing it.
But like here's the things, like
wait a sec. Hello, Derry.
Hey!
Derry's back home.
I am, and it's wonderful.
Congratulations.
Hooray.
Oh, I was like, oh, I can join Matt, I can do this, I can do the other. I'm going to be able to watch Jeopardy without lag.
Exactly.
I'm so excited.
And we're excited to see you.
Oh, thank you.
You've even
Hi,
got a
Raph. Hi, Evie.
Nicely set up shelf behind you. I think you didn't have before.
Well, it's more prettily arranged.
Yeah,
but putting my books back up was definitely the I'm home moment.
Did you knowing that you were going to be joining the Sunday Pub and that Evie is usually here, did you put the Spear Cuts Through Water up so prominently because of that?
Nope, that's her next read because she finished The Vanished Birds, right, Derry?
Sure. I can go.
Apparently. How is The Vanished Birds?
That's all of my beautiful hardcovers, and it's so pretty. It goes at the front.
And it's like a stunning cover. I've also got it
really
faced on my shelf.
Yeah, The Vanished Bird. It was almost spiritual. It was really like, it was never an urgent, I have to get back to it and read it because I'm hugely excited about it. But whenever I was reading it, I was always like, this is just beautiful. And by the time I got to the end, I was like, oh. I messaged Evie and she said that felt like I just took a cleansing breath through my soul. It was just really pure. I haven't found words yet properly for it.
I think Jimenez now has a quote for the next edition of that book.
Mm-hmm.
Like a cleansing breath through my soul.
It was just, I don't know, there was something about it that really spoke to me on some level or another. And I haven't quite worked out what or how, because it was very different from what I usually read.
All right.
But it was
you
beautiful.
You have time to gather and formulate your thoughts, or even if you don't, you got time, because we're gonna gush about it.
Yeah.
We are.
Can I just say that I really appreciate the level of passive aggressive threat that Evie can pack in her voice.
I know, it's exceptional, isn't it? It's absolutely a gift.
I mean,
Joe wants his next book to be a high colonic.
You've had the audiobook for The Spirit Cuts Through Water for some time now.
I know.
Just saying.
But I have. I unfortunately, I still have to read this terrible book about this terrible church that no one cares about.
But you care about it.
I don't care about it. So I'm going to a conference in Serbia on Tuesday, and I wanted to talk about post-imperial Arthurian fiction, but I was not allowed to, so I had to go with my plan B, which was something I made up on the spur, which is talking about Victor Hugo and the Hunchback of Notre Dame as architectural propaganda that kind of actually turned that damn church into the thing that it is today. You know, kind of go through the Disney movie that kind of made it even more popular.
Church.
Yeah, the iconography on it is pretty huge. But I do want to know, why was the I've forgotten now what you called it, but your Arthurian take. Why?
I was going to say, do
that?
Serbians not like Arthur, or what's up with that?
It's complicated. So it's like a student-run conference kind of thing, and you have to go like with like 2 panels, and you can have like a first choice, second choice, and you submit your abstracts. And I just wasn't chosen for the one where I could talk about post-imperial stuff. So I'm in the other one. It may have something to do with the fact that when they were talking about monuments or places of memory for fallen empires, they were thinking very much about physical places, whereas in historiography and sociology and so forth, since like the 1970s, with the work of French historian Pierre Nora and his work Les Lieux de Mémoire, we have realized that places of memory that form a nation's identity don't have to be physical places. They can be cultural elements as well. Yes. So yeah, I don't know. Maybe there were just like too many people applying for that specific panel. So now I'm stuck with fucking Victor Hugo in that church.
I have to interrupt the intelligent conversation just to say, yes, Colton. I'm always a big fan of seeing anyone start Malazan and enjoying it from the first book on.
If and when I ever start Malazan, I'm not telling anyone. There's so much hype around it in BookTube. I'm like, I'll have that experience for myself. Thank you.
I mean, my other favorite thing is to talk to people about it who are reading it, and I
imagine if I finish it, I'll then be like, okay, now I have to talk about it.
Oh, that's going to take years.
This one book, this Garden of me.
Oh, Gardens, yeah.
Oh, yeah, no, I wouldn't wait till the end of the whole series.
I was going to say,
I can gather, each book deserves, a fairly decent chinwag. So
yeah, they're all they all tie together, but they're all very different, individually very different books. They're all very connected, but they feel like individual experiences in a way.
I have heard that. I've heard that a lot. And so if and when I do start, I'm going into it, approaching it as the literary version of a day in the life that they do occasionally with photographs from all over the world, where these are all very separate things, but put them all together and you've got a picture of what was going on.
I'm sure you've heard enough about it that you're prepared, but like when I read it, I had not heard anything about it, and I didn't have BookTube friends.
Yeah.
And I wasn't watching BookTube, and I was actually viscerally pissed off at Erickson when I got to Midnight Tides.
Right.
Because each of the books does jump to a different place, but there's always a connection.
Right.
But there is one between House of Chains and Midnight Tides too.
Yeah, except that it jumps backwards in time, and the one connection is a guy who is at a period in his life before the one you know about.
Yeah, but House of Chains ends with them sitting there in the cave and going like, well, we got time, so you can tell me about your story. And then you get that story. That's the next book.
But it like there are no characters, there are no places, there are no anything that were in any of the previous books, except one guy who is at a period in his life which is before the one you've read about. So
I imagine I would be
it's a
pretty
weird jump.
frustrated if I didn't know that.
Well,
I would be like,
but-
what the hell is going on?
But the other thing to say about Midnight Tides is it ended up being one of my top 3 Malazan books. Once I got
Awesome.
past that feeling,
I like Midnight Tides.
I was eventually like, oh my God, this is such a good book. Yeah.
It's got some
So-
very interesting positions on market capitalism that I kind of.
Yes.
I love your brain, Raph. I
Jay
really do.
Hollenberg.
No, Derry. Matt will back me up on this. It's very, very clear on certain issues with capitalism.
Yes.
I haven't listened to any discussions about the specific books, but I have heard Erickson talking to AP, and I'm like, this is a man with opinions. This is a man who is not going to shy away from putting those opinions in his story.
Although that's one of the things I
aware.
like about the series a lot compared to other people that have opinions that I've read, is at no time did I really feel like Erickson was lecturing me.
No.
You know, he brings up issues and he shows different sides maybe of the same issue or whatever, and he lets you think about it.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, there are certainly some issues he's obviously presenting as this is not good. But at least the way I think about the world, they were things where I could go, yes, you are right. They are not good. You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree what Jeroen says, that Midnight Tides feels a bit like a Discworld novel. And I think that's
parts of it do. Yeah, parts of it do. I mean, there's certainly a lot of humor in Midnight Tides.
It was only really recently I realised that they were funny, that there was humour that was, sufficiently present enough to actually make discussion. And I was like, okay, that adds to the whole intrigue of I really want to get there.
I don't think Erickson gets enough credit for his humor. I think he's funny
He
as
does
hell.
have some really good humor
He's
in there.
very
that's
funny.
true.
Very dry usually, but quite funny.
I think the parallel for me why Malazan does in fact feel Discworldy to me in a certain way is that both Erickson and Pratchett are very sincere about the things they're doing. They're both people that have like a very clear moral sort of like backbone, and they want to change the world. They want to make the world a better place, and they do that through writing because that's what they do. And that kind of bleeds through. Like Erickson is sincere. When Erickson talks about, things, he puts his heart on the page every time.
Nice.
And that's something that Pratchett also does.
I could, like Thornell said, I could imagine Captain Vimes joining the Bridge Burners.
That makes sense.
He'd kind of fit right in. Yeah.
Well,
Mac, reading Empire of Silence. How are you liking it? I just started Ashes of Man. The 5th book. Yeah. In Sun Eater. I've just been chewing through Sun Eater. It's not at all what I expected.
Okay.
For some reason I'd gotten the impression, maybe because I've listened to Rockio talk about it and I've heard other people talk about it. I'd gotten the impression that it was maybe kind of dense and complicated like Book of the New Sun can be. And it's not like that at all. It's a page turner. It's easy to follow. The philosophy, there's a lot of things you can think about there, but there aren't like complicated philosophical sections in it. At least I'm not a very like educated guy. I don't have anything like Raph's brain, and I don't have any problem with anything in Sun Eater, and I've just been racing through it. It's really, really good.
I've got so many people telling me I have to read Sun Eater, and when I say telling me, I say demanding that it's
demanding that you do it immediately.
I read. And it's only because I love Evie that she's at the head of this queue. Spear Cuts Through Water will probably happen before Sun Eater.
I'm a huge Malazan
right
fan, and I would also say it's worth reading Spear Cuts Through Water first. Especially it's a standalone. I mean, it's not that big. It's not that long. You can read it pretty quick, and it's just that good.
Justin,
Hello, Britain.
don't be scared about starting Malazan. Don't let people fool you when they tell you that you have to be smart to read Malazan. You don't. You can just enjoy the whole thing.
Wait a
have
minute.
fun.
I'm stupid, and I'm a huge Malazan fan. So
Raph, didn't you make a
Do not
video
be scared.
ranting about that very subject?
Oh, I rant about everything. So yeah.
I was going to say.
Yeah, like, is there a subject Raph hasn't ranted about? There probably is, but
Cupcakes, maybe?
Justin,
I don't know.
Justin,
that-
absolutely do not be scared. Like, I always say to people, approach it like a mystery novel, like a detective novel. When you start a detective novel, you don't know what's going on, and maybe until the very end, if it's a well-written plot, you don't know what's going on.
Yeah.
Right, but you can still enjoy the journey to get there to figure out what's going on. And some of Malazan is like that. There are things in it that you will not understand immediately, and there is an amazing story and awesome characters and all sorts of cool shit going on, whether you understand those things or not. So
Yeah, I think
I
that's
like this. Rogue is an idiot and loves Malazan.
exactly. I mean, if
kind
Rogue
of-
can read Malazan,
I'm
then
approaching it with
Justin,
a
you
bit
should
of
be scared.
trepidation,
Yeah,
not
I
because
think-
of the potential scariness of the books, Justin. I'm approaching it with trepidation because I had a stroke several years ago and I have difficulty world building in my head. And that's where my fear of it comes from. So please don't take my trepidation as any kind of level of where you should be.
Ooh, Ron, is that a Wheel of Time burn? It seems like it.
Oh,
Oh, is that the Wheel of Time burn that we've been waiting for every Sunday pub?
and
I
it
didn't
didn't
say
come
it.
from me.
I didn't say it.
I
Raph
just
and I
wanted to-
both did not say it. Like, I was happy to not mention Wheel of Time, and Ron just had to pull that out.
Wait, what am I agreeing with, Mitch? I don't know what I'm agreeing to.
I think he's being sarcastic because you're being so quiet while we talk about Malazan.
Oh. All right. Anyways, Derry, how's Motsy?
he is so happy to be home.
Oh, good.
This cat is
I was
he
worried about him because I
really
know
big
that you said that
purse.
he was having his, he was.
Oh, he
picking
was living his
blankets.
best life.
Oh, okay.
At the house he was living in visiting, but they weren't his people. So when he came home and all his people were here, he was the most lovely I've ever seen him, and his purrs were big purrs.
Oh.
For about a day and a half, he was like, "I'm home with my people." And
I
now
was-
he's
I was-
nodding off all day.
I was also really, like, I was just away for 5-6 days,
Mhm.
and I haven't had Fitz that long.
No, but long enough.
And yeah, a while, but I mean, I was a little bit nervous, honestly, to
Mhm.
leave her alone for 5 or 6 days. I mean, not alone. I had a cat sitter. Lady was coming
Yeah.
twice a day, morning, evening, feeding her, playing with her, whatever. But I was a little nervous. And the lady was really sweet, this Russian lady that lives down the street. And I said to her beforehand, I was like, I'm a little nervous. I've never left her alone before. Could you just text me
Yeah.
when you're there and just let me know everything's going well? And she actually started sending me videos and photos and all this sort of stuff. And
Oh.
I showed one of her texts to one of the guys I was at the gaming retreat with.
Mhm.
And he was like, whoa, you may not have a cat when you get back. Because the lady, she totally fell in love with Fitz. She was like,
Of
Fitz
course.
recognizes me now, like after a couple of days. Today, Fitz came up on the sofa and sat next to me the first time. And I was like, yeah, she'll sit on your lap tomorrow. And wrote me the next day, she's sitting on my lap. You're right. She totally fell in love with her. And
So
then I came
here's a-
home and I was expecting the typical cat bitchiness that she would
Yeah.
act like she didn't know me for a week.
Mm.
And the first thing she did was jump up in my lap, groom herself intensely for an hour, and then fall asleep. So
Oh,
I was like, okay. So
it's
she
my
actually
birthday
maybe
back.
kind of missed me. Yeah.
So here's
Yay.
a question, Matt. What with your Fitz troubles over the last couple of months and so forth, and you saying earlier that Hadrian is like Fitz in that you want to slap him. Did you name your cat Fitz because you want to slap her?
No. I named my cat Fitz because Fitz is one of my favorite fictional characters, even though he's a fucking idiot that I want to slap
But
all the
he's
time.
our idiot, and
Exactly.
we love him.
Exactly.
So
Which
guys,
is also
I'm so excited for you.
like you'll be interested, Derry. Like Sun Eater has moved. I'm still thinking about it, but I think Sun Eater has moved Fitz on my list of main characters who suffer the most to number
Really?
2. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So I think
I feel
Hadrian
sorry
is
for that character.
Yeah. He, especially in the book I just finished, Kingdoms of Death, which sounds like a real,
Yeah, that's
vacation
a
of
real,
book.
uplifting kind of
Yeah.
story.
It's Hadrian has a rough time, and he's a bit of an idiot that you want to slap all the time. So
Oh, okay.
You know?
Well,
So
have
familiar
you,
territory.
Matt? Have you ever read the Carcanos books by Stephen Erickson?
Not yet. No, I've got them,
Because
but I haven't read them
I'm
yet.
telling you, there's a character who shows up in the Malazan Book of the Fallen, and who may be probably the character that suffers the most and the most unjustified in just about any book I've ever read. It's really rough.
Okay.
You can guess which one it is.
Rogue says Malazan's version of Fitz is Tok the Younger. Actually, in Kingdoms of Death, there was not a scene, but a section with Hadrian
Yeah.
that made me have like visceral Tok flashbacks. There was a particular bit in there where I was just like, oh my god, this reminds me of Tok suffering a great deal. Oh my god.
I think the difference is, though, that Tok the Younger is not like Fitz in that Tok the Younger is not a fucking idiot. He
No,
just has
Tok-
incredibly bad luck.
Tok gets into, well, Tok also makes a couple of really questionable decisions, honestly. There's a particular decision he makes where when I read it, I was like, wait a sec. Let me read that again. Did he really just decide to do that?
Yeah.
So, I mean, he's not he is smart. He's definitely a smart character and not stupid the way Fitz is, but
I think it's more
Yeah.
like with Fitz is very emotional, makes choices because of his emotions, and Tok, and that's just like probably just like Erickson and the way he writes stuff. It's like Tok usually isn't like these stupid like double bind situations where he can only choose wrong, and then he usually chooses more wrong.
yeah.
Hmm.
Grumpy Smurf is here. Hi, Anita.
Do you know how awful that is? Is before the message popped up, I knew who you were talking about.
Yeah, of course.
Smurf. Oh, that's terrible. That's
th-
terrible that I knew.
That's her avatar.
Oh,
That's her avatar on Discord. It's Grumpy Smurf.
true. But I hadn't realized how closely my subconscious had connected the two.
Mhm.
Wow.
I'm talking about books that I'm scared about, that everyone's scared about. I'm scared about reading Sun Eater. I'll probably just like read it and not tell anyone about it.
Why? Because it's so popular and you don't want to look uncool.
Because everyone loves it, and I'm like, the more everyone loves it, the more I'm sure that I'll hate it. I mean, I have no reason to think that. It just feels
No, you
like
don't.
it's so overhyped at this point that I'll
That's
definitely be
You and
disappointed.
Alan best
I was
friends
gonna
at
say,
this point,
this
Raph.
is why
say.
segueing into Jeopardy is going to be really easy now because
Exactly. Speaking of which, I meant to say that earlier. I decided we're only going to go until 10 so that everybody can go and watch Jeopardy on Alan's channel, which
Oh, cool.
is a lot of fun. And Joanna, my co-host at the Fireside Discord, who everybody knows and loves,
elf.
is an assassin elf, and she is on Jeopardy. So that being the case, why don't we do another short sprint until 5 before 10, and then we'll cut off and jump over to Jeopardy. Everyone cool with
good.
that?
Oh, I just showed
Sounds
up
like
though.
I can learn more about bad architecture.
Is it my fault that you're late? If you
I at
can't
least have
read a
good reason.
clock,
I think Derry's trying to call us all bitches.
No, I'm reading a book
Just
called
Britain.
Glitch. It's great.
okay.
I
Sarah
might.
over at Sarah Reads talked about
Oh,
it for a
that
while
one.
ago.
Okay.
What are you
And
thinking, guys?
it's-
You think I should finally start Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, or should I continue Joe's book about superheroes?
You will
Superheroes.
have more fun with Joe's books about superheroes. I can
Now
tell you
I have
that.
started Joe's book, and I'm liking it so far. So
Yeah, then continue that. Why
Keep
start
reading about men punching spaceships. It's fun.
Yeah.
go with that one.
you know,
Jonathan
Liam, I
Strange.
really should start my own pub. We can compete on Sundays, though Matt's probably going to win. He has more subscribers.
Maybe.
No, the clever part.
Time next time, Britain.
You know what you do is you start your own pub one day later because people need a pub every day.
Well,
Yeah,
that's
you
true.
You can have the after pub.
The after pub. All right.
Yeah, because
Well, I
I
mean,
mean, my
we're in a
pub
different time
my
zone.
pub can't go that late because of time zones, and you can just have a pub that starts right after my pub.
It's
So
called the after pub.
we get more and more pub. Why not? Anyway,
Yeah, time zone coverage. It's important.
read
Yeah.
and don't forget to mute yourself.
All right, Joe's book it is.
Hello.
Hello.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well,
Good
afternoon where I'm at.
Yeah, a bit later here, but
It's very early here because daylight savings just kicked in.
Oh, nice. Wait,
How
so what's
early-
the time difference now, dearie?
yeah.
I'm an hour earlier than I was before. It is now almost 8 o'clock in the morning.
Wow.
I read a
So wait,
chapter of Wistful Ascending.
That sounds good. It's a good book. I learned
Read.
about Victor Hugo's disregard for the legal system, which I do agree with. Unlike most of the other stuff he's been writing so far, because fuck that guy.
Anarchist rat never.
Did you say Victor Hugo?
It's Victor Hugo, yes, the French writer who writes about churches and stuff.
Writes about churches and stuff.
He
Hi,
also
Joe.
really hates hotel.
Oh,
You're
I was just
kind of
reading
late.
your book.
Did you hear that we're leaving in 5 minutes?
Jeopardy's about
Okay. Yeah, it's Book Jeopardy on Alan's channel starting at 10. So I didn't want to
I think
make people
very
choose.
few book tourists will compete
And I
with
know
that
the
because
pain,
we all
Joe.
want to watch it.
Exactly.
But I was just reading your book, Joe.
Literally, he's just told us he finished a chapter.
Which that sounds great. I hope you're enjoying it.
I'm digging it so far.
Okay.
Cool.
Though I was a little confused on some stuff, but it was made clear.
Excellent. I'm reading about the mating habits of carnivorous spiders. And it's really funny.
That is not the reaction I would expect.
I am really enjoying this. As a non-fiction book, it is very entertaining.
Now you are in New Zealand. How covered in carnivorous dangerous spiders is New Zealand compared to Australia? Now that we have an
0%.
Australian and a New Zealander here.
0%. Nothing that lives here is poisonous or venomous or tries to kill you.
You're
And so-
lucky. You're lucky, Derry, that first of all you're not Australian, and second of all you're not in Germany, because every single German, without fail, that I have ever met
Yeah.
Knows about the spiders.
one of the first things takes 10 minutes maximum. One of the first things they ask me is, what's it like living in a country where everything wants to kill you?
Yeah.
Or
I always find
have
it
you ever been
bizarre
bitten by a
that
venomous
anyone lives
spider?
there.
Or have you been bitten by have you ever seen a shark attack? Or like all of the, and it's like, no.
I
I
think
did
it's
have, when I
mostly
lived there briefly, I did have a goanna that lived in my laundry.
As an American, people say, "What's it like to live in a country where all the people want to kill you?"
That's true.
Hey!
That's true. I have actually seen someone be shot while living in America. Yeah. So
Okay, that's a bit
yeah.
That's just the
on the
Tuesday.
nose, really, isn't it?
I think like my image of Australia has been fundamentally tarnished by Terry Pratchett writing
At the
That
last
book.
continent. At last
the
continent.
Last Continent book. Yes.
Yeah. It's not far wrong. I am going to be honest. If you aren't in a major city, that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
It's not-
And most of Australia is not a major city.
no,
Yeah.
which is why pretty much everyone lives in those major cities.
Yes. Exactly.
I have friends in Australia, and I have Australian friends, and all the stuff I know about them just always reconfirms all these ideas.
Yeah, and the people, like there is a very stark difference between the people and what they're like in the cities and in the outback. Like if you meet
Yeah.
someone from a small town that's like 500k away from Sydney or something,
Yeah.
they are nothing like Sydney-siders.
Also,
I mean,
America.
It's the same thing
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
U.S. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah, of course.
It's not going to be the same as someone from a podunk southeastern town. So
No, you're
Which-
quite right. There. Yeah.
Which interestingly is not like that in so much in Europe. Like people from smaller
You can't really
villages
get
in
that far
Germany.
away.
Exactly.
Just
That's the
being
thing.
Europe.
Like everything is so dense that people in
Yeah.
small villages in Germany, they've got access to everything that everybody in cities do as well, pretty much. And most of them are within half an hour of a big city. So
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's true.
We call
Doesn't
that a
matter.
suburb.
yeah, in America you would think of it as a suburb, but people really they really have divisions here. Like people will say, "I'm from a village," and it's
Yeah.
like you live 20 minutes from Dresden. Like, what do you mean village?
To be
You live in
fair,
a
though,
suburb of Dresden.
like living in a village in Germany is still different from living in a city. Sometimes
Yeah.
I think
Oh,
it's
yes, there will
voluntary.
be
It's sort of like on purpose to keep that sort of like countryside thing going.
Yeah.
I
But
agree with that.
there are
I live,
differences.
I mean, okay, New Zealand's tiny and our population is really tiny, but I lived in a suburb about 40 minutes out of Auckland, the biggest city, and it was a very deliberate attempt from everybody living there for it to remain a village.
Yeah.
And when the little tiny corner shop expanded, it was uproar in the community. It's like, no. Oh, okay, yes, that would be convenient, but no, please don't do that. And they were delayed a lot by the residents in upgrading that store, because everybody was like, no, don't be encouraging that kind of growth.
The development in Germany is also quite different than in America. Like in America, there was a city and there was nothing around it. And the suburbs grew out from the city. In Germany, there was a city and a village and nothing between them. And then the city got bigger and maybe the village got a bit bigger as well. And they sort of met.
Yeah.
You know, or some of them, like Berlin. Berlin wasn't even a city. Berlin was a whole bunch of different villages
that all mashed together
that
as
were
they grew.
all sort of separate, and they became one big thing. Anyway, it's time for Jeopardy. So thank you everybody for joining. Thanks for joining at the last minute, Joe. Sorry to disappear on you, but
No, it's all good.
we don't want
can
to
all continue the conversation in Alan's chat.
exactly. See you over on Alan's channel.
I'll try
you're
to hang out
interested
there.
in the Jeopardy and you don't know about it, it's a really fun book-oriented game show that Alan does. If you don't know anything about it, go to the Fireside Discord. In my channel, I posted a link. In Joanna's channel, she posted a link because she's competing. And see you over there.
Yep. It'll be fun.
See you there.
I might show up, but I have to sort of fix my recording.